Hey guys, coming for the Americans, Season 5, Episode 10, Darkroom, and I was definitely really looking forward to this episode. You guys know I really have been loving this season, even though it's been, I think, slower than other seasons have been. It really has benefited from that. The show has really been taking their time, and I think they haven't really done anything that big because they don't want to do anything that big to reconvene the show yet, because I do feel there are going to be some big things happening at the end of the season, but I think that they're just trying to wait till we get to that end. Then they can set up for what's probably going to be a very chaotic final season. But let's just get into this episode because, wow, is there a lot to talk about. I mean, I really did love last week's episode. This one, I think, was on the same level. I really did love this episode overall. A lot of stuff that these characters are starting to do is really starting to blow up in their face, and it's really not working out that great for them. But if you guys were upset about the lack of Paige in the last episode, this episode very much made up for it because we focused a lot on Paige's relation with Pastor Tim here, but also a lot on the overall relation with Phillip and Elizabeth. But let's just get into this episode because there definitely is a lot to talk about, and I really did enjoy this one overall. And I love the way he started off because we see Phillip, he's dressed in a disguise, and he's having beers with Alex, I don't know really how you pronounce his name, but they're chatting about their wives and sons and how their relationships are. And as we know, Alexei is very much a pessimistic. Like, ever since we've known him, he's always been very pessimistic. He's always looked at the negatives of things, and no different here. I mean, he's being his usual, negative self, and he confesses that he's worried about his son Pasha because he's miserable since they arrived in the States. He doesn't really talk anymore, and he confides in Philip that he misses living in Moscow, which, as we know, that's what they're trying to do here. They want them to get as far away from America as possible, because obviously, the original intent was to go after Lexi. They thought Alexi was the one who was responsible for, the contamination of food. They thought he was the one responsible for it. They thought maybe he was in cahoots with, the Americans, but after, basically realizing they got the entire mission wrong, now they're just trying to get him out of there so they can leave him alone. And it seems that does seem to be working, but in doing so, Tuan has gone to some pretty extreme measures to do that. I really did love the scene, though, between him and Elizabeth, because he has returned to the safe house, and it seems that they are moving on from the events of last week, which makes sense because he seemed pretty sincere, and it seemed like, his family was in danger. And what I loved about that scene last week is that it reminds us that Tuan does have a family, and that he isn't just Philip and Elizabeth's mark. There's more to him than that. But Elizabeth gives him this pep talk, about how he can't let any of this really get to him. And it turns out Tuan is really going in crazy measures to bully Pasha. He even put, shit in his locker. I mean, he is really going very far, but he kind of has to. I mean, he has to do whatever he can to ensure that they want to leave immediately. And you can tell there's a part of Tuan that doesn't really want to have to do that, but unfortunately they have to, and it's definitely very sad to see. But that's a big theme of not just this episode, but this entire season in general, is doing things not because they want to, but because they have to, and having to deal with what they started. They can't just stop doing something. This is really, I think, the first time where they haven't really known how to go about a mission. They kind of been doing it all their own. One, because Gabriel was the one who gave them the mission, and now Claudia, she doesn't really know where to pick up from there because, she's just randomly come back into the picture. Two, they got everything wrong. They thought that Stobart was the one that they were supposed to be going after. They thought that Deirdre was also on the wrong side of things, but they see that's obviously not the case. So you can tell that this is a very messy mission, but I don't think it could be either way, and I definitely did like how motherly that scene was between him and Elizabeth. Even though they're not actually mother and son, they're very much starting to resemble that, and I thought that was definitely very well shown here. And it turns out there's actually a bigger reason why Alexei actually does want to come home, not just because of what's going on with Pasha, but also because about his mother. His mother apparently is this biology professor, and she took him ice skating rather than rush home to make dinner, and she always kind of made time for him. And Moscow is always a nice city, and he always enjoyed being with her, and I think he wants to go back there because life was just easier there. Sure, things were different. There are definitely more benefits that they have in America, but they really have not had many benefits. I mean, life has kind of been complete shit for them. He also knows his wife is clearly engaging in some sort of an affair, so you can understand why he's so eager to get back, and I really do love the way they are getting us to sympathize with these characters, and it's really making us dislike what Elizabeth and Phillip is doing, but I think the show wants you to. Like, again, they don't want to have to do this, because they do definitely care for the Morozovs, but at the same time, they know that they really don't have a choice here. Like, they kind of have to do this way, just because, again, it's such a messy mission. I think this was, again, very well portrayed here. So Elizabeth and Philip then head home, and they're surprised to find Paige up in the middle of the night. She's cleaning the kitchen floor, which was very strange to see. They don't really know what it's all about, but we realize that she's actually very upset because she actually read Pastor Tim's diary while she was babysitting his house. Remember, he's writing this diary as like a therapeutic way for him to deal with everything, and he wrote about her, and obviously whatever he wrote very much did upset her, and apparently he's very worried about Paige's soul and thinks that her parents' lies really has fucked her up. And I would agree with that. I mean, Paige has really never been the same since Philip and Elizabeth have told her the truth. And, you know, ever since then, she's been completely different. The thing I think that really has damaged her is seeing her parents kill. I mean, no child wants to have to see that. No one. I don't think anyone wants to grow up to think, oh, my parents are assassins, or, oh, my parents have to kill. Just no one wants to have to see something like that. You know, you see your parents as your advocators and your guideline. I mean, they're the ones who provide you guidance, and, you know, they kind of went against everything the Paige has really believed in, and they've kind of forced her to kind of end all that. And I definitely do agree with what Pastor Tim is saying, but again, she's kind of chosen to do this. She gave them all these questions, and there's really no turning back now, and it's definitely very sad, but that's just kind of what happens, you know, now that they've told Paige what's going on. So meanwhile, in Moscow, we don't see a ton of Oleg in this episode, but we do see he's still concerned about the Soviets searching his house, even though, like I said, he is giving them the right, you know, he is saying the right things, and for the most part, it seems that things are going okay with the Soviets. Like, he definitely is giving them the right answers. He obviously is very worried, because, I mean, they did show up at his house, they did threaten him, and a lot of the questions they're asking him, you know, he's worried he's going to put his family at risk, and he confides in a friend and searched for advice, but Oleg's friend didn't exactly boost his confidence. Like, basically, she doesn't exactly tell him that, oh, things are going to go great. She tells him that, look, things are kind of going to go the way they go, and I do agree with her there. Again, he made this choice to be in Moscow, and we know that every single FBI agent, minus Stan and Adderholt to an extent, I think he does kind of have Adderholt on board, besides them, everyone else is longing for Oleg to return, and they want to do whatever they can to try to get Oleg back in the States as soon as possible, but obviously Oleg is not on board with that, and I think he knows that's inevitably what's going to happen, but she tells Oleg that if they search his house, that they must have something on him, that they didn't just do it as like a procedure. Yes, they might have told him that, oh, you know, it's just a standard procedure, that's all it really is. There's definitely more to it than that, and I would definitely agree. I mean, you don't just randomly search someone's house. Usually when there's a search warrant and you're searching someone's house, it's because you're suspicious of them doing some sort of, you know, whether it's drugs or just something very wrong. You think that they definitely have some sort of illegal content, and I do think that that wasn't just, you know, a standard procedure. I think definitely there is a bigger reason why they searched Oleg's house, and I think he knows very well what it is, but again, we know that Oleg is trying to steer as far away from this as possible, and he's done a good job, relatively, I think, a good job so far, but how long can this really go on? I don't really know. I just don't really think this is going to go on, that this can go on for that much longer, unfortunately. It sucks, but I just don't really think it's going to go that it can't go on any longer, really. I don't see that really happening. I think, again, Oleg wants to believe that, but I just don't really think that's going to happen, and, you know, she takes her windshield wipers off to prevent them from being stolen, and, you know, you don't know exactly who this woman is, if this woman he's working with is even good, so I just don't really know what exactly is going to happen there, but I'm very worried for Oleg this season. I've heard a lot of people say they don't think he's going to get out alive, and now more than ever am I starting to believe that. So Stan Adderholt to meet with Sophia, who, as we know, the last time we saw her, she had like a lot of demands for them, and they seem to be having actually really good luck with her. She actually has new teeth and new intel for them. That basically the Soviet soccer star is actually one of the couriers who ships secret information and objects back and forth for the KGB when he visits the U.S. So it does seem like she is willing to give them this intel, and basically she's thrilled that they rented an empty apartment in her building as a meeting place, so she will be safe and won't get caught. Obviously, because what they're doing is kind of illegal. I mean, they just kind of randomly picked up this woman who isn't really supposed to be here, and I'm pretty sure is illegal. I don't think she's legally, like, she doesn't have a green card and things like that, and I mean, they didn't really have that back then, but she fills them in on her job and says that she's getting close to a powerful defenseman from the Soviet, and yeah, so it seems like things are going relatively well with her, and it seems that she might actually be able to help them. The big, question here is Stan going to be able to get his boss on board? Because we know how determined his boss is to get Oleg, and I don't know if it's going to work as well as Stan thinks it is. I think Stan has the idea, and he's definitely optimistic about it, but I just don't know if it's going to work as well as he thinks. So Phillip and Elizabeth, they head to the safe house, and they check in with Claudia and turn over the information gathered last week from Kimmy's father, revealing that Mahujadin fighters were discovered dead from a hemorrhagic fever, similar to the virus that they helped the KGB steal. So again, this is another thing that they're very worried about. Philip is saying that they were told it was being used for defense, and Claudia says she doesn't really know anything about it. And I believe her. I mean, again, she's been away all this time. She really has not been involved with this stuff, and you can understand that she can't really help them, unfortunately. And they're certain it was the Lassa fever sample they sent to the center. And the center said that they were using it to develop a defense and not kill people. But again, Claudia doesn't really know anything about it, so she can't really give them an answer, unfortunately. But we then see they let her know that Pastor Tim is making mischief again. Perhaps he can be sent somewhere far away with a job offer that he can't refuse. It just seems like the best course of action to take, and they want him to get a job at a reserve or Peace Corps far away from Paige, and Claudia agrees to look into it, and I like that she did agree to it, like she is kind of being reasonable here, and that they will let her know, but this will be Paige's call, like they'll let Paige have the final decision. So Claudia says the KGB was also thrilled with the wheat sample they delivered, but they will be working on it for some time, and Elizabeth and Philip are kind of worried about, what does the some time mean, and it turns out this might actually go on for years. Yeah, this might actually mean that they might have to keep their Mark, Stobart, and Deirdre around for years, which is insane to think about. But again, because of how backwards this mission has really been, and because of how wonky things have been, it's really not that much of a surprise that this is going to go on for years. I mean, I was shocked that it's going on for that long, but if you really think about it, because of everything that they've gone through, and, all the stuff they got wrong, and all the information they kind of need to reprocess, and really rethink on how to do this, it makes sense why it's going to take them years. And I don't think we're going to see the end of this mission. I'm going to tell you guys this right now. I don't think we're getting the end of this mission. I think that this mission is going to continue throughout the season, but they're going to get caught and they're going to be forced to shut it down. I just don't think this mission is going to be successful. It sucks because you want things to go well for them, but I think because of everything they've been through, I doubt this mission is actually going to work for them in the way they want it to. So they then break the news to Paige that Pastor Tim could be manipulated into leaving, and Elizabeth says that they don't think that she should have to be around him anymore. Again, he's just not really a good influence, and Philip says that they don't think that she should have to manage him for the rest of her life, so they propose the idea of a job he would love that would keep him busy and far, far away from them, and Paige kind of finds it weird that he doesn't really even know, but Philip assures her that they would only do it if it was something good for him, but Elizabeth says that they wouldn't do it if she did not want them to. Like, if she wants Pastor Tim to continue being in her life, they completely understand that. But at the same time, they don't really have a choice. At the end of the day, it's kind of like what the center wants. That's kind of how this is going to go. But Paige isn't, like I said, really thrilled about the idea. She thinks it's weird to do it behind his back. So you can tell she definitely does have that compassion for Pastor Tim. Understandable. We've known for a while, until Matthew, he really was her only friend. And he was someone that she really did confide in. And obviously they have a very solid relationship, and I don't think she necessarily wants to use that and, to abuse that. She wants to use that to her advantage, and I could very well see Pastor Tim becoming her mark. I think that definitely could have happened a season ago, but because of all of this, I don't think that's going to happen now. I just don't possibly see it happening. I know that that definitely is a possibility that he could become her mark, but I doubt that actually is going to happen. I just don't really see a possibility with that, especially with the way this episode ends. Definitely not happening. But Paige then asks about the weed situation. And remember, Paige doesn't know about how they got the mission wrong and how their fears were completely wrong, and her parents let her actually keep believing that lie, which is understandable, obviously. They got her involved. Let's not try to, make her more unscathed than she already is. And Elizabeth says it does feel good when they can make a difference. And Paige says that they did something so huge and no one even knows. And Phillip says that that's just kind of the way it works. And we see that that's exactly, how things are for them. They've always kind of been this way. They've always kind of done things and no one really knows about it. And, you can tell that Paige doesn't really want it to go unnoticed anymore because they are doing such good things for their country, and yeah, I would agree with that. So we then cut to the Morozov house where, we see a long scene, a silent dinner at Oleg's house with his mother and father, whose secret about her imprisonment decades ago is now hanging over the family because we found out all that information last week, and things are very awkward between that family now. I mean, there's a lot of things that Oleg just doesn't know about, and Oleg is kind of realizing that his mother preferred his brother, and that he didn't really even want her there, and that she could have easily, maybe there's more going on with his father. I mean, it's a very awkward scene, to say the least. After all the information, it kind of seems like a sound, it makes sense, though, definitely. So we then cut to the Morozov house, and we see Morozov, Alexei's wife tells Elizabeth about how miserable her son is at school, that every day they have to fight him to get out of the house, and Elizabeth says that she knows a lot of kids who've gone through this sort of thing, but it does get better. But as we know, Elizabeth's the one who's making things worse. Like, she knows that this is her fault, and you can tell she definitely does feel a little bit of regret for doing that, but again, she can't let that get to her, and she explains, she breaks down tears, and basically their family's falling apart, and his wife says, what if not? Then she confesses that one of her students are actually having sex, and she was so mad at Alexei that they fight all the time, and her student was so nice, easy, and fun, and Alexei is now trying not to fight for Pasha. He say that they must be strong, and she basically says that she wants her family to be happy, and, obviously that just can't really happen anymore. Elizabeth is saying then fight for that, and I think she genuinely does want them to be happy, but again, they just need to get them out of their lives, and it's a very telling scene because you can tell that Elizabeth is feeling a lot of regret, but knowing that she's the one who's causing all of this sorrow for the Morozov family, I think really makes us care more for Elizabeth in this scene. You can tell she definitely does care about this family. She wants to help them out, and that's why she has to go to these extreme measures. When all is said and done, they're just safer in the Soviet Union. They were better in there in the first place, and now that they're kind of ruining their family, they want them to fix things, but who knows that's actually going to work out for them. And that's the thing I think is so interesting about this scene, is that while she does definitely want their family to be happy, at the same time, she's the one causing them all of this sorrow, and who knows if they're actually going to be able to get out of this. So later the night, we see Phillip and Elizabeth go on a double date with Stan and Renee, and they make plans for another night out, but in the car, Phillip and Elizabeth worry about her being a KGB plant meant to turn Stan, and finally we get the answer why Phillip is so concerned. Now, we've known for a while, obviously, why he's worried, but there's a much bigger reason that we just haven't really heard about, because Elizabeth is saying, oh, you're being ridiculous, and he shouldn't really care this much, and he finally admits that he doesn't want Stan to end up like Martha, and this was a very powerful scene because we know Phillip really did care about Martha. That's why he relented to her about who he really was, and that's why he wasn't afraid for her to see his real face. Even though she doesn't know his real name, she knows who he is, and she knows what he was involved in, and obviously it had a very huge, insurmountable change on her. I mean, there was just so much shit that she went through, and she's in so much despair that, again, I do think Martha's going to kill herself. I just don't really see another situation like that happening. She's basically living in complete solitude at this point, and she doesn't really have much of another choice, and he clearly does not want Stan to end up that way. And again, it shows that Phillip does care about these people. Like, they're not just taking these people, and they're not completely heartless. They do definitely have they are definitely caring souls, and they definitely care for Stan, and you can tell why he definitely does want Stan to be in a better position. He doesn't want, things to go well for Stan, because we know that he wants things to go well for Stan, because obviously things between him and Martha definitely didn't go well at all, and obviously, Martha was someone who she was too attached to Clark, and he sees how happy Stan is with Renee, and you can understand why now we really do understand his concerns, and I think this really does make the story even more interesting than it already was, and I really am definitely interested in seeing where we're going to go with this moving forward. I don't trust Renee at all, but I don't think we're going to get an answer until really the end of the season. I think that's really going to be, telling where her loyalties really lie, because at this point, I can't really tell you. I mean, I honestly don't know. But the next day, Phillip then heads to an S meeting, and it's a really good scene. We see him. He's actually we see him going for a run. He's dropping a red marked rock, and he hears this inspirational speech from one of his S meetings. And the rock makes its way to the residential where Tatiana actually decodes it, and we see her actually confront Alexei's wife on the streets, and she says she's from the embassy. She asks if they can talk, and she's a friend that she has nothing to talk about. And we don't know what Tatiana's really trying to do here. Why is she suddenly involved? But this was definitely very interesting. But Philip's message must have told Soviet officials to invite the Morozov family back home with no punishment, no questions asked, only to set her up as blackmail against her CIA paramour. Because as we know, Tatiana is working for the CIA. At least she was currently working for them. And I don't know really where that's going to go. Now, I thought that, Arcady, we know Arcady's obviously gone. She was in a relationship with Arcady. I don't know if we're going to see Arcady again. But based on what we've seen this season, I would not be surprised if we see Arcady again. I kind of feel like that's what's going to happen here. But again, we'll have to see really what's going to happen. But she does say that they probably think if she ever wanted to come home, that she might be in trouble because of the way that she left. And she says that she understands why she would think that there's a lot of bad information out there, Western propaganda. But the truth is that people who leave, they want them to come back. And it looks very good for them, too, that there would be no problem and no repercussions. And this scene, I think, is really here again because I do think we're heading to Russia in the final season. I think Phillip and Elizabeth are going to have to go back to Russia. And remember, they're going to welcome them with open arms. And the big question is, if Phillip and Elizabeth have to relocate to Russia, are they going to be as welcoming as Tatiana really says they are? I think that's really going to be something we're going to have to think about moving forward. So then we get to the most shocking part of this episode, but it was a good shock for once. Like, we don't have a lot of really good shocks in the Americans, but this was a good surprise. We see Phillip, he leads Elizabeth to this abandoned warehouse, and we see the Russian Orthodox priest from the last episode. Remember the one that was conversing with Gabriel, and they had this really great relationship, and he's this longtime contact, Gabriel's. He's actually there to marry them, and yeah, Phillip and Elizabeth actually do officially get married in this episode. They go to he's in a robe with candles lit, and he speaks in Russian, performs their wedding rituals from back home, and they take hands, they step forward onto this sacred cloth together, and it's a very well done scene. As we know, Phillip and Elizabeth, yes, they were kind of forced into an arranged marriage, but they never really fell in love till after. It really has not been till years later that they really are starting to fall in love and really becoming compatible and turn into that actual couple. And now that they are, now they can officially get married. And I know I said that, Phillip and Elizabeth have always kind of been on different sides, but in the end, this really does confirm that they do have each other and that they're going to face this together, because when it comes down to it, they both got that mission wrong. They both are trying to send Pastor Tim away, and they're both trying to get the Morozovs back to Russia. That is all stuff that they are trying to do, and not stuff that they're trying to do individually. This is all stuff they're trying to do together, and they take hands, they step forward in the sacred cloth together, the priest blesses them, pronounces them as man and wife, and yeah, they're officially married now. I was very surprised too, but I thought it was a very well done scene. I think it's been something that's been a long time coming, and it made sense why we finally did get it here. But now that they're officially married, they head home together. They hide their wedding bands in their safe, and they share a kiss. Clearly, they don't want anyone to know that they just did this, but it's just a little something that they're always going to do. They're always going to have that. They're going to know that they actually are officially married. It's something that's bothered them pretty much all their life, and it was very satisfying to finally see them engage in that ceremony. I thought that was definitely very well done to see. I don't know if that's going to play a bigger role moving forward, but as we know, The Americans is always a show that sets up things and you don't know they're really setting things up. But this was a very well done scene. I really do love the way it was done, and for me, this was definitely, I think, one of the highlights of this entire season. I really did love the way that scene was constructed, and I think they definitely did take the time with it. You know, that's what The Americans always does. They take their time with things, and this was a very good example of that. And I definitely really did love the way that was handled. But we then see Stan's information about the KGB soccer players yielding info about how covert information is smuggled. And in hack-proof cases, they destroy the contents if anyone tries to open them by force. So this clearly seemed like a setup for some kind of future operation. We don't really know what that's all about. But it does seem like Stan is starting to get information about this soccer player. And I don't know really where that's going to go. But we then see Alexei's wife. She's picking up her clothes from the dry cleaner. And a woman corners her on the street. Like I said, it was that scene between her and Tatiana. And I thought, like I said, I'm very interested in seeing where Stan is going to move forward here with this soccer player. But then we get to the ending here, and the ending of this episode is truly insane. I mean, we knew obviously that Pastor Tim did write this book, but it's far worse than I could have feared. And at the Jennings home, Phillip and Elizabeth are told by Paige that she wants them to send Pastor Tim away. She's really thought about it, and she thinks it's good, not just for her, but also for him. And I would agree. I mean, Pastor Tim, he's just way too involved in this. They kind of go against everything that Pastor Tim really does believe in. And I think if he did get away from the Jennings, he would be able to have a better life. I mean, Paige, yes, she has provided a lot for him. But if he got away, I think he'd just be in a better place, knowing that Paige is, you know, I think he would think about Paige, but I do think that he would get over it eventually. And she says she wants them to give him a job offer. She's not mad at him. He's been good to her, but he hasn't been good for their family. And since it would be good for him too, and I would agree, it definitely would be a good thing for him. And that's the thing a lot of people aren't realizing about this. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, poor Pastor Tim. He's actually in a very good position here. He's getting a job offer. He's going far away. Like, guys, they're not putting him in, like, solitary confinement here. They're not sending him to jail or anything. They're giving him a job offer somewhere that's far away from there because it just would be a better thing for him. He just isn't good in their family, and this is to prevent any sort of, consequences or any sort of thing that the center could recommend. They're giving him a better offer than anything that the center probably could give him, and I definitely really did like seeing that. But she actually did photograph his diary, saying that she might help them figure out the best place to lure him away, which might be South America. So they developed the film in the basement, and they see why Paige was so troubled by his writings. And basically, they take her to the secret room in the garage, and they begin developing the photos themselves. And Paige, as them watches, her interest is definitely piqued. And I love the way this is done, because we definitely see their reactions, but we don't know what they're really seeing until the very end. The three of them, they're saying in the dark room, they read the diary pages in complete silence while the song Slice of Life plays in the background, which was a very well done song here. But we see some of the passages. He's asking if they're monsters. He doesn't know. But what they did to their daughter, he'd have to call monstrous. And he's seen sexual abuse. He's seen affairs. But nothing he sees compares to what Paige has been through. And there's more. I mean, he says that a severe psychic injury, that the damage is done, and there is no fixing it. Like, even religious beliefs won't fix it. And she says, you know, she can't really, I mean, he doesn't know how she can trust anyone again, and he's so afraid for her, she doesn't even know how much she is really suffering. And the biggest part of it all is that he says what they have done to Paige is worse than sexual abuse, and he doesn't even feel that faith can save Paige. They look at this, obviously, very upset, but also very much, I think, pleased what they're actually doing with him, realizing why it's a good idea to get him out of there. And that is the way this episode ends. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get into this episode and where we're going to go for the rest of the season. So, overall, guys, really good stuff here. I was very impressed with the way this episode turned out. And again, I want to reiterate about Pastor Tim, because a lot of people have been saying, oh, poor Pastor Tim, what a terrible thing Pastor Tim has been through. And sure, I mean, what has happened with Paige has really shaked the very, you know, basically every fiber of his being. Everything that Pastor Tim believes him, you know, believing in faith and innocence and, you know, having that great life, all of that, he's really been shaken to his core because of it. And I think getting him away from Paige and getting him to move on and getting, a better job opportunity somewhere other than America is the best course of action to take. And I think he's going to be much happier than Martha because he hasn't gone through all of the pain that Martha's gone through. He hasn't been attached to someone that has betrayed him. It just isn't, it doesn't really compare to what Martha's been through. What Martha's been through is so much worse than what he has, and I think he's going to be okay. I think, yeah, he definitely will think of Paige, but it's not going to consume him. He's going to move on from it quickly, and I think overall it is the right course of action for them to take. You can tell, obviously, they do feel bad. Like, obviously, they never really wanted to get him involved. This only happened because Paige was impulsive, and he was really the only person she could confide. She just had to tell someone about it, and unfortunately, that's what got him involved. And now, because of that, he's going to have to be away from her. And she's okay with it. Like, she obviously is going to miss him, but she thinks that it is the right thing for him, and I would agree. I think it is the right course of action for them to take, and I think people really are underestimating how good of a decision it really is. Like, this is a good thing that they're doing, and, I don't think people are really understanding that. Like, I've heard so many people complain, and when in reality, I think this is actually probably the best decision they could have made regarding Pastor Tim, but, that's just personally how I feel. As far as everything going on with the Morozovs, I think we're done. I honestly think we're done at this point. I mean, I know Tatiana said to her that, we're going to welcome you with open arms. And I think that very much, again, it's setting up the idea that they are going to be relocated to Russia. I think that is exactly where we're headed in the last season. It just seemed like it makes the most sense. There's been all of this setup. We've seen so many detours to Moscow. It just seems inevitable. Like, why wouldn't we go to Russia? After all we've seen this season, it just seems like it makes a lot of sense for them to go there. So I do think we're going to go to Russia by the end of the season. I don't know exactly what's going to lead them there, but I do think Russia is going to be the next step for this show. And I do think what Tatiana said is something that we're going to have to keep in mind, that they are going to welcome them back with open arms. And is that going to be the same for Phillip and Elizabeth? That's the real question here, is are they actually going to be as welcoming as they feel they are? But the other really shocking thing is the whole thing going on with Sober. The fact that this might literally take years and that they might never solve this mission is insane to think about. But when it comes down to it, it makes a lot of sense because this was something that was going on in the Soviet Union that no one really did anything about. No one really knew about it. No one really said anything because, again, we looked at the Soviet Union as the devil and just these terrible monsters, kind of like how Pastor Tim says. He doesn't really know what to categorize them as, but he does very much see them as these monster-type creatures. And sure, they definitely are. I mean, they do have to go to extreme measures, but I would argue it's needed. Like, you need to go to these extreme measures. You can't just do something in a subdued, normal manner. You just can't possibly do that. And I think that's something that really is starting to get to not just Phil, but also Elizabeth. I think this really is starting to get to them. I think what they're doing, they definitely are being very effective by. I don't think they want to truly send the Morozovs away. I don't think they truly want to send Pastor Tim away, but they know it's the best thing to do, and that they're just going to be happier not in their life, because their life is just way too complicated, and knowing what happened to Martha, obviously, they want things to turn out a lot better. And especially when it comes down to Stan. Now that we know why Philip is so concerned, it makes a lot more sense now. Obviously, because if Renee is in fact Russian, this could be a very similar situation where she's going to uncover her identity. She's going to get Stan involved in a lot of stuff he doesn't really understand. But Stan is a lot more heavily involved. That's the thing that Philip really needs to keep in mind, is that he is a lot more heavily involved with the Soviet Union. He's more aware with the way they work and things like that. And sure, Martha did work for the FBI, but she didn't have the knowledge and really the compassion for the Soviet Union that Stan really does. So I do think if Stan finds out, it's going to be a bit different than it was with Martha. I think he definitely is going to be affected, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as shocking as a revelation. I think it's definitely going to be shocking, but I do think he's going to take it a little bit better than Philip feels he is. I mean, that's just me personally, but I do think it's going to be a little bit better than how he feels. But the other big thing here is this soccer player. We don't know where this is really going to go, but I do think we're definitely going to get more details about this soccer player. Clearly, there's a lot of stuff that Sophia does know, and it seems that things are going well with Sophia. Like, she actually does want to give them this information, and I'm glad to see that Stan actually did pick a good mark here. I'm glad to see that's going well for them for the most part. But Oleg as well. Oleg, clearly things are very awkward right now between him and his family. And again, I don't think he's getting out of the season alive. I just don't think that's possibly going to happen, especially after what his friend said. You know, she didn't exactly seem very optimistic and that he is going to be able to stay here. I think eventually they're going to come for him. I think he's going to get what's coming to him. I mean, honestly, sure, it makes sense why he did what he did. And yes, we do have a lot of sympathy for him because of that. But when it comes down to it, I do think the FBI is going to win. I just kind of feel like there's just too many people on board with this plan. Even though Stan and Adderhole are trying to steer as far away from that as possible, I just don't think they're going to get their way. It's 2 against like 50 of them, and I just don't think it's going to turn out the way. The FBI is simply too heavily involved in this, and they're letting it just get to them, and everything they care about, you know, again, they don't see the Soviet Union as people. They just see them as these, you know, marks that they're going to use, and that then, you know, they'll stop them from terrorizing them, which, you know, there's just so much more to the Russians that they don't really understand. And I think that's something the show just does very well, is yes, we have these characters who are committing really bad things. I mean, what Oleg is doing, yes, it's heavily illegal. What Phil and Elizabeth are doing, yes, it's very wrong. The show has very well shown that. But they don't really have much of a choice, and they kind of have to do what they do to survive in this world. And I think that's something that they handle very well in the show. Overall, guys, I really did love this episode. I really am loving this season as a whole. There was a lot of really big stuff going on here, a lot of really big developments, especially the wedding. I definitely was not expecting that. But between that, everything going on with Pastor Tim, the end of the Morozov plot, I'm assuming this is the end. I don't think we're really going to see more with that. I know Tuan is still going to be out there. But I think as far as the Morozovs, we're kind of done with that for now. We'll have to see really where that's going to go. But overall, guys, I definitely really did love this episode. I'm definitely giving The Americans Season 5, Episode 10, Darkroom, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. So overall, guys, remember The Americans. So much guys thought of this episode overall. Left your thoughts in it. We only have 3 episodes left, which is insane. The season always moves by quickly. That's something I always notice with The Americans. And it's crazy because then we're only going to have 10 episodes left before we know it. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Loved your thoughts on it. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.